And good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, depending on where you are around the world. It's a real pleasure to be presenting this tonight. It is 8 o'clock on the 27th of November 2021, and on the 27th of November 1841, at exactly this moment in time at 8 p.m., Dr. James BRAID took to the stage to give his inaugural presentation on what would later become known as hypnotism. So it's a great pleasure to introduce my co-host tonight, Dr. Gabor Philo. Gabor, how are you? Good afternoon, good evening.
Fine, thanks. It's afternoon here on a relatively sunny day, waiting for the snowstorm.
Fantastic. Now, as an initiation, as we begin this presentation, Gabor, you're going to lead us through a short summary of mesmerism and magnetism, I believe, in the run-up to Braid's discoveries on hypnotism. Is that correct?
That is indeed correct.
Excellent. Okay, so we will.
Very good. So, you can't talk about hypnotism without talking about mesmerism. And to understand that, we want to go back to the beginning. And we're not even going to start with Mesmer. We're going to start with one of my countrymen, a nice Hungarian lad who was a Jesuit priest, a member of the Swedish Academy of Science, an astronomer, a linguist, a polymath essentially, who was also fascinated by healing with magnets, steel magnets particularly. And for those of you that don't read German, the first source listed there is a letter between him and Mesmer, because Mesmer and him worked together. And the rest are descriptions of other work that he did with magnetism. Now, Mesmer, Franz, as he's known, started his medical practice in 1777 in Vienna and ended up ultimately in Paris. And throughout that, there were untold issues with his practice. But before we discuss that, let's look at what he thought about. In his conceptualization, fields or energies ran through the body, and if they got stuck someplace in the system became deranged and ill. And so you had to go to a magnetist to have those blockages removed. If you're aware of the concept of qi, it bears a striking resemblance to the Eastern idea of qi. And you're looking at a Kirlian photograph, which is a method by which you can see the energy fields about living things, in this case, fingertips. Now, Mesmer was a phenomenal marketer, and perhaps that's the greatest thing to know about him, inasmuch as his name has become eponymous for the idea of being entranced. At any rate, to accommodate his large practice, he created this creation in front of you right now, the baquet, which is basically a glorified Leyden jar or capacitor, as we would refer to it in today's world. The idea was that you would have circles of patients holding on to the iron bars or the cords, and then he would appear in very theatrical garb, charge the Leyden jar, and then everybody would have a cathartic moment in which they became healed. These baquets were used with rows and rows of people. The first would be holding the handles and the ropes, and then others in subsequent concentric circles would be holding on to the patients in front of them. Well, needless to say, professional turf was being infringed upon with his magnetic cures, and in Paris, the king requested a couple of commissions to find out the veracity of this process. So at the end of the day, the first royal commission concluded that the cures were indeed real. They just had nothing to do with a magnetic fluid or an animal magnetic fluid. Rather, it was all based on suggestion. And if you look at the list of the first commission, two of them lost their heads to Joseph Ignaz's guillotine during the French Revolution, which was rather a sad fact for living in those periods of time. At any rate, by the end of it all, Mesmer was considered to be a quack, a charlatan. And there is a statue in Meersburg in Baden-Württemberg, which is labeled the incarceration of science by the magnetizer Franz Anton Mesmer. But one has to ask the question, was he just perhaps a little ahead of his time and the science didn't catch up? Here you're looking at an image of Maxwell's right-hand thumb rule, which says if you have an electric current, you have a perpendicular magnetic field. And this just gives you the directions in which the fields are moving. The human body is an entire network of electric currents, hence magnetic fields. If we look at this image, you see the electromagnetic field of the heart, which is technically referred to as a torus. And you can see the EKG there, which we've all come to know because it's ubiquitous. And if we look at the brain itself, we have the electroencephalogram readings of brain waves. And today, treatment is actually being done with magnetic fields through transcranial magnetic stimulation. So maybe Mesmer wasn't all that wrong after all. If we fast forward a little to India, there's a Scot by the name of James Esdale. He was a physician and a surgeon who very carefully and accurately recorded 300 plus surgeries done with mesmeric passes. The passes were done by technicians, local Indians who were working for the hospital, and they moved from the patient's head to his feet, and over any length of time, from a few minutes to an hour, they would get surgical grade anesthesia. And many of the surgeries that were done were impressive because at the time, the morbidity and mortality rate was exquisitely high. Esdale's was 5%, which was amazing. On his return to the UK, he attempted to continue with mesmeric passes and magnetic hospitals, but not very successfully, unfortunately. He was sort of branded the same way that Mesmer was. Now, clerics seem to play a significant role when it comes to hypnosis. The Abbe Faria is one of them. This statue happens to be in Goa, India, and he was discerning, not unlike the First Commission, that there is no magnetic fluid. What you're actually looking at is suggestion. Now, for those of you that are hypnotists and know about direct and indirect forms of hypnotic induction, Faria was the epitome of the direct authoritarian induction. He would generate a degree of rapport with some discussions with the patient, and then he would very forcefully command them to sleep. He ended up in Paris introducing what he referred to as Oriental hypnosis to society at the time. And he had an interesting quote where he could not conceive how the human species could have been bizarre enough to seek the cause of this phenomena in the baquet in some external influence in a magnetic fluid. Now we move to North America and we look at a photograph here of three sisters. They're here because their communication with the dearly departed caused one of the most renowned scientists in Europe to give us what we have today, our most valuable hypnotic phenomenon. These two sisters originally communicated with the dead by raps and knocks and such like. And the process spread throughout the globe like wildfire. At one point, the sisters actually recanted, but there's debate whether they recanted sincerely or not. However, their communication so irritated Michel Chevreul that he was going to prove these people wrong. And what we have to understand is this man lived quite a long time and was a very well-known, very renowned chemist. So he took it upon himself to prove that it was suggestion that caused ideomotor signaling, tiny muscle movements below the subject's awareness that was communicating whatever was going on in their subconscious mind at the time. And in hypnosis today, in therapy today, this is a phenomenally important technique and tool, which we owe to the Fox sisters indirectly. There was an American author, Edward Eggleston, who was known for children's books and history and such, but this quote from him, because of his interests in general well-being, demonstrate that these ideas were out and about and very popular and well-known throughout North America and Europe for that matter. And we have here the journal from the Phrenological Society, because as we'll see later, BRAID was actually very much interested in phrenomagnetism. And perhaps the person who most interestingly put together the idea of an external force, which was called the odd, was a gentleman by the name of Reichenbach. So moving to this gentleman, Charles Leonard Lafontaine, he was the magnetist that BRAID actually first encountered, and he went there to see this man quite skeptically. Now, what's interesting about Lafontaine is he was the editor of a journal on magnetism. He also had a meeting with Pope Pius IX and convinced Pius IX that animal magnetism was not illicit, was not depraved, was not a hoax, and hence the church should not have any issue with it. And the Pope's statement you can see on the slide. At any rate, if you're like me, you tend to get confused about timelines. So this slide shows how all of these folks overlapped between 1700 and 1900. And they at all times were aware of each other's works based on their period in history. Moving on, we have here a family tree, if you will, of animal magnetism. It is linked to cousins and other relatives. Qigong and Reiki from the East. Spiritualism used it rampantly. Electrobiology was popular in the 1800s when electricity was first being used for every cure known to man. The phrenologists and the phrenomagnetists were aware of it. Therapeutic touch is a fairly recent creation by Dolores Krieger, which is taught to nurses generally. And energy medicine has grown annually in terms of what it has to offer. So we are talking about something that is several hundred years old, actually it's thousands of years old, but it has its tangential relationships to all of these other areas, even in the present day. Now, for those of you that like to read, I recommend these three books. Gould's book, A History of Hypnotism, is very succinct. The Induction of Hypnosis is a phenomenal book, which is very hard to come by. And Schroeder's The History of Energy Transference. So without any further ado, we've come to James BRAID. Back to you, Mike.
Excellent. That was fantastic. Thank you very much for that. I'm very much looking forward to inviting in our guests very soon. But before I do so, I would like to just play a very short 8-minute presentation just about Dr. James BRAID. So we've had the lead up to the history of BRAID, and this is a little bit about him, the man himself. Now, I'm in the process of making a short documentary about BRAID, and for tonight only, I have stolen a few extracts from the documentary that I'm making. This is very unpolished, but it's just going to give you some video footage taken at the various places where he lived and worked along the way as well. So it's a short trailer, if you will, of what will be a more polished final version.
James BRAID was born on the 19th of June 1795 in the parish of Portmoak in Fife, Scotland. With his older brother William destined to inherit the farm, James sought out a new life and profession and went to Edinburgh to study medicine. As part of his training, James was apprenticed to father and son Doctors Thomas and Charles Anderson in Leith. BRAID was appointed surgeon to Lord Hopetoun's mines at Lead Hills in Lanarkshire in 1816. In 1825, the BRAID family moved to Dumfries, where James set up a private practice at number 14 Castle Street. In 1828, the BRAID family moved south again to Manchester. They moved to number 67 Piccadilly.
On Saturday the 13th of November 1841, James BRAID paid £50 to come and see French magnetist Charles Lafontaine here at the Manchester Athenaeum.
BRAID had always maintained that he had gone to Lafontaine's demonstration as an open-minded skeptic, and in fact he returned to 2 more such demonstrations. On one of these occasions, BRAID was amongst the medical men who were invited onto the stage by Lafontaine. BRAID examined the physical condition of the magnetised subjects, especially interested in their eyes and their eyelids, and concluded that they were indeed in quite a different physical state. BRAID then performed his own experiments at home at number 10 Piccadilly, concluding that the phenomenon had nothing whatsoever to do with the gaze, charisma or magnetism of the operator, but instead all that was needed was a subject's fixity of vision on an object of concentration at such a height and such a distance from the bridge of their nose that the desired upwards and inwards squint was achieved. BRAID's first hypnotic subject was a Mr. J. Walker on Monday the 22nd of November 1841 before several witnesses including Captain Thomas Brown, who was BRAID's friend and also the curator of the Manchester Museum. Impressively, just a few days later, on Saturday the 27th of November 1841, BRAID delivered his very first public lecture at the Manchester Athenaeum, demonstrating that he could replicate the effects produced by Lafontaine without the need for any sort of physical contact between the operator and the subject. Animal magnetism. Mr. BRAID, surgeon, 10 Piccadilly, Manchester, will deliver a lecture on the above subject in the lecture room of the Athenaeum this evening, Saturday the 27th instant, when he will perform a number of experiments on individuals who have already been tested, and also on any of the company who may offer themselves, by which he will be enabled clearly to prove that the effects exhibited by Monsieur Lafontaine in his lectures here can be produced without human contact with the patient, and therefore have no right to be attributed to the influence of animal magnetism. Mr. B will moreover account for the effects on strictly philosophical and physiological principles. The lecture to commence at 8 o'clock precisely. The tickets 2 shillings and 6 each, to subscribers to the Athenaeum 1 shilling. Braid would go on to deliver more lectures on the topic. This advert from the 4th of December, his second lecture, shows that Braid books the same venue as Lafontaine and charges the same entrance fee. However, he donates the takings from the event equally between the night asylum and the town mission.
In 1843, while living at 3 St Peter's Square, James Braid published his book, Hypnotism or Nervous Sleep.
800 copies of the book sold within just a few months, and importantly, this book detailed cases of both success and failure. Braid says, I consider the hypnotic mode of treating certain disorders as a most important ascertained fact and a real solid addition to practical therapeutics, for there is a variety of cases in which it is really most successful and to which it is most particularly adapted, and those are the very cases in which ordinary medical means are least successful or altogether unavailing. Still, I repudiate the notion of holding up hypnotism as a panacea or universal remedy. As formerly remarked, I use hypnotism alone only in a certain class of cases, to which I consider it peculiarly adapted, and I use it in conjunction with medical treatment in some other cases. But in the great majority of cases, I do not use hypnotism at all, but depend entirely upon the efficacy of medical, moral, dietetic and hygienic treatment, prescribing active medicines in such doses as are calculated to produce obvious effects.
James Braid died on the 25th of March 1860. He died at home at 212 Oxford Street. His house was named Rylaw House after the farm where he was born in Fife. The site now is the impressive quadrangle here at Manchester University.
James Braid was buried in Neston in the Wirral, where his son, Dr. James Braid Jr., worked as the local doctor. James Braid's obituary in the Lancet, 31st of March 1860. The sudden death of Mr. James Braid, surgeon, of Manchester, aged 65, which took place on Sunday morning at his residence Rylaw House, Oxford Street, in that city, is a subject of much regret. He had been in apparently good health all last week, and had made his usual house calls upon his patients, displaying the quiet cheerfulness in his interviews with them which generally characterised his demeanour. On Sunday morning he complained of pain up the spine of his back and coldness, and ordered a cup of tea. After partaking of it, he breathed heavily several times and died almost immediately, it's supposed from disease of the heart. He was best known in the medical world for his theory and practice of hypnotism, as distinguished from mesmerism, a system of treatment he applied in certain diseases with great effect, and which has recently attracted much attention in Paris. Long before his discovery of hypnotism, however, he'd performed some extraordinary cures by operations on contracted muscles, in cases of clubfoot and similar conditions, which brought him patients from every part of the kingdom. In addition to a large circle of friends whom his warm-hearted and genial bearing and professional skill attached to him the wealthier classes of society, and amongst the medical profession, he will be much regretted by the humbler classes, whose suffering under disease he often succeeded in alleviating without recompense.
As well as discovering hypnotism and being the first to apply a series of structured incremental hypnotic suggestions to a hypnotised subject, Dr. James Braid was a philosopher, a surgical innovator, a scientist, an inventor, a philanthropist, a family man, and a gentleman. He led a truly fascinating and remarkable life. His contribution to the modern scientific understanding cements his place in history as the father of hypnosis. So there we have it. That is our introduction. And like all good dentists, we ran about 10 minutes late, Gabor. So that's par for the course.
Indeed.
So it is my great pleasure, first of all, to introduce Dr. Kathleen Long. Kathleen, how are you? Thank you for hanging on for us there.
I'm very well, and I really enjoyed both presentations, and it's wonderful to have somebody like Dr. BRAID to be so proud of in Scotland.
It really is. It really is. Now, obviously, you and I know each other very well through our work in the British Society of Medical and Dental Hypnosis in Scotland, but you are also currently the president of the European Society of Hypnosis. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I've been on the board now for, I think, 7 years, and this is my time to be president. It's been a very unusual presidency because we've been in lockdown and not done a lot of face-to-face meetings, but it's been hectic because we've had to rearrange everything, and we've had to learn new skills as well as to how we deliver our lectures and also reach patients in hypnotherapy.
Of course. And tell me a little bit about your work with hypnosis then. How long have you been using it, and how do you use it in practice?
I've been in general practice now. I'm retired, but I still work in general practice. Basically, for the last 45 years, I've done some senior management posts as well. But essentially, I got interested in hypnosis in 1982 when I realised that there were a lot of my patients who didn't seem to be getting better in the way that I would expect them to. And I was looking for something else, and I decided to look at hypnosis training, and I haven't looked back since. I've used it, I think, every day in general practice since. It's a very effective therapy. As has been said, it's not a panacea. But having said that, there are very few instances where I think that it doesn't help in some way for a lot of patients. And I've used it in sport as well, and was the kind of mentor for the Scottish netball team. We didn't do too well at winning, but I kept them relatively free of injury and motivated.
Fantastic. That's great. And what you said there, I love, because I love the fact that you look at some of BRAID's early work and you would assume it would be very rudimentary and very basic, but there's certain points that he gets absolutely spot on, straight away.
Absolutely, and I think the other thing is that nobody's saying that hypnotherapy is a panacea, as I said, and he makes that point. And so, first of all, I do when I'm using it in general practice, I always have my medical hat on, and that's very, very important. And it's important that the patients understand that. But I also offer them the alternative, and so many patients love that. And it's a different momentum in general practice because we don't have a lot of time. So using techniques that can turn around people very, very quickly sometimes is important, or just giving them one technique that's perhaps going to help them with an emotional impact of an illness, or with a way to deal with anxiety or pain. So there's so many uses of it, and I think it's just an absolutely wonderful therapy.
It really is. I'm now going to introduce Mark Jensen. Mark, how are you? Good evening.
I'm doing very well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Mark, you're currently the president of the International Society of Hypnosis. Is that correct?
Indeed, I am. Yep, I'm the proud president of this the wonderful International Hypnosis Society that brings people around the world together who use hypnosis to communicate with each other and work together. And
you're also working on a number of books. There's some already out, and there's some in the pipeline, I believe.
That's right. I'm a professor and vice chair for research in the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine at the University of Washington here. So I have an academic hat, and I publish articles. I do research, and I write books and edit books. And the majority of those are on hypnosis because it's, as we've talked about, it's absolutely fascinating. And as BRAID pointed out, incredibly effective for some things, perhaps less effective for others. It's not a panacea, it's not a cure-all, but something that people should incorporate in part of their toolbox to help them with their patients.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the issues that some of the early mesmerists had. There's a fabulous book called The Mesmerist, if you've read it, that talks about the life of John Elliotson, who was one of the founders of UCL. And it's a fascinating read. And part of the issue was he believed just about every story that he heard about what mesmerism could do. So it's right, and I think hypnosis maybe by some is either misportrayed or misconceived as to what it can actually achieve and what it can do. So it's great to have you on board, Mark, and I'm looking forward to some interesting chats with you. We also have Bridget Bongard. Bridget, good evening or good morning, is that right?
Yes, from Wahoo.
Fantastic. Now, you're the current president of, is it the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And like everyone else, everyone is finding ways to communicate virtually. And our last two conferences were actually, national conferences were virtual. Our training has now become virtual. And, you know, absolutely amazed at how well people do with virtual training. So we have probably at least 6 trainings a year, and I substitute in as a teacher's faculty, and I'm stunned at the amount that can be done virtually, you know. So I think that's one positive. The second positive thing is, like everyone else has mentioned, though, this is not panacea, this is not the cure. I believe hypnosis is an extremely powerful tool to use in your practice. I'm a board certified medicine physician. I'm also a fellow of Wild's Center for Integrated Medicine. And so after retiring from internal medicine, I now run a nonprofit for cancer patients. And I use this constantly in group sessions and such like that, and even personal one-on-one. So I just can't speak enough about being able to use hypnosis as adjunctive therapy because it makes such a positive impact.
Thank you, and it's so true. Actually, my dad's a doctor, and some of my initial exposure to hypnosis was similarly work with cancer groups, overcoming the symptoms of the chemotherapy and the radiotherapy. And I think one of the things I love as well is how you can transfer some of the skills that you learn. You know, whenever I go to one of the big conferences, the ISH or ESH is going to a lecture that seemingly has got nothing to do with dentistry, yet I can pull out things that I know I'm able to utilize in my day-to-day work.
You know, and Gabor mentioned the business of really what a lot of these therapists in the past times were doing was entrainment with your energy field and their energy field, and that can be done with your presence, it can be done with your voice, your entire being. And I think that's a great deal of what Erickson did as well.
Absolutely.
So this is one of the things that I really want to emphasize, that you can very quickly get an induction just by changing your own resonance, so to speak. And then, of course, methodically going through and helping them to unlock their subconscious mind, shutting off conscious mind, etc.
Fantastic. Our final guest tonight is Dr. Marcello Romi. Good evening. Is it good evening in Uruguay just now? Is that right?
Hi, Mike. Hi, everyone. Yes, we are here afternoon. It's 33 degrees, so it's very hot weather.
I think it's 3 degrees in Glasgow.
Yeah.
Now, Marcello, you are a relative newbie to hypnosis, and you know, one of the things that we are most interested to hear about from you as the conversation develops tonight is going to be how it has been for you, really being one of the first people in your country to start using medical and dental hypnosis. So we're going to look forward to having that conversation with you. So thank you very, very much for joining us. So welcome everybody. And it's 180 years of hypnosis. Can you believe it? And I think one of the interesting things to start talking about for anybody that's watching that doesn't really know very much about hypnosis is that question. What is hypnosis? Because for many years there has been several debates about how we actually describe it to patients, and I would love having such a phenomenal panel of people here. I would love to hear how you explain what is hypnosis to your patients. Met with a wall of silence, nobody prepared to take that particular village.
I think it depends on the patient quite often and how much they already know. I think quite often also what you've got to do is to debunk what they think they know about hypnotherapy, because I still think there's a lot of patient things that, one, you're going to take control of their mind, and that you're perhaps going to make them do things or reveal secrets that they don't want to reveal. And there's a fear of hypnosis because of, I think, what's been out in the media, and also I think around things like stage hypnosis. I think that has scared a lot of people, and a lot of people see it as entertainment. That's the other thing, because of things like stage hypnosis. So I think it very much depends on the patient in front of you. Patients quite often, and I think I'm in a very fortunate position, and most of the doctors who see patients on a regular basis are in this position where the patient already trusts you, and that is a big, big thing. So they're not coming in not trusting you. They're coming in, they want help, and they want to believe that you can help them. And that gives us a massive, you could call it, placebo effect as well, and it makes it much easier to build rapport with the patient, to set up that connection, because it's already partially there. So I think it very much depends on the patient in front of you, what you say to them and how you describe it. In terms of definition, there are many definitions of hypnotherapy. I like to tell patients that actually gives them more control over what's going to happen to them, and how they can manage their own illness by using, if you like, their own subconscious mind to do that. And that usually is enough explanation. For somebody who wants more detailed explanation, I would probably put them in for a longer consultation, and it probably would be a private one, because I really don't have time to maybe spend an hour with a patient in general practice. So that's where I'm saying that trust and rapport that you can set up very quickly with the patient is very, very important. But I always tell them what I'm going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent.
For those people that are reticent or perhaps unknowing about hypnosis, I explain to them that it's a natural process that's built into our hardware and our wetware, and it has evolutionary survival benefits. And what we ultimately end up doing is coaching them, teaching them how to take what they're doing anyway unknowingly, so that they can do it consciously and intentionally for whatever their end result is. And I refer to it as a life skill, which has applications in all domains of daily living, whether it's stress management, sleeping better, to the management of pain, as Mark can certainly address, or in terms of anesthesia, if we're going to be doing some unpleasant dental intervention.
So, and you know, as Gabriel mentioned, I focus on pain management, and pain is one of the areas that, when BRAID talked about, there are areas where hypnosis is incredibly effective for. Addressing pain is one of them. And I deal with patients and help patients manage chronic pain. And so the way I talk about it is that the fact is our experience of pain is something our brain creates to protect ourselves, and that sometimes it can get stuck in the on position, and so a person may feel more pain than they really need to. And hypnosis is a strategy for teaching the brain to respond differently automatically, and that the patient, as we've talked about already, can learn this strategy. They can get control over their brain's response, so that they can walk around feeling more comfortably. And so I say this is a skill you can learn. I can teach you, and you can practice if it's something you want to learn. And then I say, are you interested? And universally, they say, sure, this sounds very interesting. So again, it's an issue of self-control, learning self-management skills, which can be very powerful. And I can teach, we can use it to teach people how to understand how they respond to others so that they don't respond to negative suggestions. So it's a life skill. And I think when explained in that way, many patients become less frightened.
I think that's brilliant, and I agree with all the above. My task is to say that it is a natural phenomenon, and all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. And I'm going to teach you how to shut off that conscious mind, which is keeping you stuck, and go into that creative conscious mind that is only yours, that has the perfect solution for what you need to accomplish. And so I'm already starting that hypnotic state, and then I invite them. When you go in and out of hypnosis all day long, hypnosis is just a change in your awareness, in your state of consciousness. And if you were to look outside right now and watch that tree blowing in, et cetera, and then I say, well, that's daydreaming. And daydreaming is a light state that you experience all the time. I teach them about the different states of consciousness, and by the end of it, they're really excited. And I ask, I bet you'd be curious to know how this works. Let's do it. Let's play. And that's how I usually start a session, unless somebody's in abject pain or they need a direct entrainment.
Marcello.
Okay, that was a beautiful explanation, Bridget. I think the same. As you said, Mike, I had been a dentist since 20 years. Yeah. Some colleagues asked me tonight what was hypnosis about and how it works and how I do the therapeutic thing. So I was thinking tonight that as in true love in life, in the passion, as I do my things, I was not looking for it. I think hypnosis found me. It's kind of like the universe sent me signals day by day, month by month. Since I know you and the board, I'm Italian here. My name is 100% Italian, but I live and work in Uruguay. So we do not have hypnosis societies. And right now I'm actually the one who develops and practices this in dentistry. I think in the near future, regardless the communication, regardless of technological advances, will depend largely on the correct use of this therapeutic tool. It's a fantastic tool. And in this context of Corona pandemic, I think this is a positive bond. This is a positive point generating bonds with other colleagues worldwide, so as to extend this knowledge for the benefit of all of us. So my last words are that I think that hypnosis found me.
I love that sentiment. That's nice. One of the things I find interesting as well, it's a bit like that. The patients who I feel are most suitable for hypnosis are the ones who come looking for it, because someone with a creative mind, a creative imagination, is perhaps a little bit more likely to develop anxieties or phobias or fears, because they're almost using hypnotic processes the wrong way, if that makes sense. And it's been mentioned a couple of times, being a coach and being a teacher and actually explaining to someone how you can utilize the same process but change the message, and that actually has the effect of turning things around. So I quite like the fact when a patient comes to me and they have an issue, I know that hypnosis will most likely help them. But if you meet somebody who's a stranger and they say, I'm a professor of physics, can you hypnotize me? I've got no idea if I can or not. But if you have a phobia, then the chances are, in my opinion, it can help.
Well, phobic patients are already in trance. They have to be in trance to experience the phobia. And the answer I would give to your professor is if you allow me to. Or if you allow yourself to be hypnotized. The bottom line is, if somebody said, I don't want to be hypnotized, and you can't do it, and they've already made up their mind before they come, the chances are they're probably not going to be easy. And why should it be easy? I like a challenge, and I quite like to see the patient that perhaps is not reluctant to be hypnotized, because that involves consent, but somebody who almost dares you not to hypnotize them, but they really do want to be hypnotized. And these are sometimes very perverse situations, but frequently they work out very, very well, and the person becomes absolutely convinced then, and is probably one of the best adverts for hypnotherapy.
That reminds me of one patient who was a truck driver with severe low back pain. Nothing else was working for him. And he came to my office. He said, my wife made me come here. I don't believe in hypnosis, but she made me come, and I'm just going to do it because she told me to. So I said, fine. And I thought, this isn't going to work very well. Boy, did he respond well. And he was just as surprised as I was. This is amazing. This is the first time that I felt this relief. And he just took, like a fish to water. He went right there. So you can't always know. And we do know that there are certain brains that are more likely to respond. There are brains that have more white matter, brains that where parts of the brain communicate to each other. There are brains that are people who are more naturally go into these kind of states of meditation and calmness. And so a person may not know that they have that brain. And so I think, the thing to do is to give it a go and see how people respond. And if they don't like it, fine, move on to find something else. But the data are very clear that when you add hypnosis to anything else you do, it tends to make it more effective and faster. So, we have 3 dentists here, and, my dentist tells me that I should only floss the teeth that I want to keep. I think you should only use hypnosis with the patients you want to get better.
But, Mark, you bring up the power of words. It's absolutely critical. So one of the reasons why I use the word curious is because it already bypasses the conscious mind and puts you right into the realm of the subconscious, which is very curious. A little child, I want to know, I want to create, I want to play.
Yeah.
And by using that, and if you notice, we're not going to work at it, we're going to play with this. So I think language is incredibly important from the get-go. And even people who are oppositionally defiant, you can still work with their language and help them achieve control, because that's part of the process of being oppositionally defiant, right? Is feeling the lack of control, and this is a huge defense mechanism. So I just want to throw that out for other people to jump on that train about language. Dabney Ewan wrote a really small but great book, 100 Things I'd Known About Hypnosis Before I Got Going. And he explores language. Don't try anything. Put yourself on trial. And all right, brilliant. Thank you, Mike.
Superb book. Absolutely superb book.
It really, and it's a short read, and you can keep going back and back and back. People don't want to be quitters, for smoking. If you're a quitter, you're a loser, right? So I just want to bring that up while we're talking about this, and be curious to know what BRAID and Dale and some of the other great thought about language as well.
Well, the answer to that about Dale, he didn't use language. And he did nothing but mesmeric passes. And it's not Dale that did them, it was his technician. And which is interesting, because that's an item that keeps coming up in the professional societies. Harry Aarons, who was a lay hypnotist in the 50s and 60s, mentioned it a lot. And Elvira Lang, who I'm sure you all know, took it one step further. She created an entire program called Comfort Talk for radiological technicians and other hospital staff. And she's now working on an app for the dental profession. The object being that you do not need the doctor to be the one overseeing the activity. Now, the question I would pose is about the patient, whether they're defiant, whether they're resistant, whether they're difficult. My question is, when they enter your therapeutic edifice, are they not already in some altered state of mind? And is it not our jobs to recognize that, determine whether it's sympathetic based, fight or flight, versus parasympathetic based, which is what we're aiming for, so that we can then communicate, be that verbally or non-verbally. And one of the masters of non-verbal hypnosis was Ainsley Mears out of Australia back in the 60s. So there's a lot of tangents to the process, and God bless Dabney, his little book. Each one of those pithy statements is an entire course in and of itself. But we tend to lose the trees in the forest at the same time, because I'm convinced the person that's looking for hypnosis is in an altered state. The person that's defiant or phobic or anxious is definitely in an altered state. So that when they come in, my job is to recognize it and then try and get it to a place of either neutrality or a parasympathetically mediated state in which we can then communicate therapeutically with statements and suggestions that will engender the change that they are looking for, and perhaps us as well.
Sorry. I think you're absolutely right. They are in an altered state when they come in. Very few patients actually want to be at the doctor's, because I don't like to say this, but we're a kind of necessary evil, if you like, because without illness, without people feeling unwell, without people feeling anxious, whatever, essentially they would be quite happy to live their lives. So they come in an altered state, as you say, Gabor, and you're absolutely right. You need to tap into that as quickly as possible, certainly, as I say, in a general practice situation, to try and get in there and use that chance, use the chance they're already in to start to change things for them. I mean, a classic one in general practice would be the white coat hypertension, which is not technically a physical thing, but it's something that is so common, and so many people were putting antihypertensives only to find that they didn't need them. And in fact, at one point I had white coat hypertension, and I'm going, how can I have white coat hypertension? I'm a doctor and I don't get nervous. But I think it was maybe to do with previous experiences of being in the doctors or whatever, where you used to get, in vaccinations, chased around the couch to give you a penicillin injection. Lots of different explanations that your logical brain will come up with. But the bottom line is these things are very, very common, and people now recognise them. And I think you're absolutely right. Use the patient's chance and you will get results virtually every time.
Someone just had chatted up or put it in the chat box that this person agreed with language and was also an actor. And I wanted to really focus on the fact that actors have the ability to stand in their own energy field and change it up or change it down to make us feel something different when we're watching an actor, don't we? And so absolutely. I'm going to actually put an interesting submission in that that you entrain with where they are, just like Elvira Lang said. So if they're agitated, you raise yourself to agitation, and then you bring your whole energy field to a calming state, and it'll bring them to a calming state as well. And then if you open up your heart of compassion for that individual, oh my God, things quickly change. So I just wanted to bring that up in addition to what Kathleen was saying.
I think that's one of the things when I first learned hypnosis that I guess really surprised me was just how much I would be able to use it day to day. in observing and utilizing things like that. And that's, I think most of the people who go on the training courses would agree that their greatest application of these skills is in their day-to-day communication with patients. Absolutely.
Well, we're sort of an instrument, or the facilitator.
Yeah.
We don't do to them. We just set the field. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Marcelo,
Sorry. I just have a short story for you, because regarding Mark's story, I work on Saturdays on a hospital the whole day, and yesterday at noon, the last patient I have was a truck driver, so it was kind of funny because he was a very massive, huge man with double-handed like me, just big one, dirty hands. He was sitting in the dental chair, and he started talking to me like, or seeing me like, what are you gonna do me? So I started talking and some mirroring and some communicational skills. The attention was at least 25 minutes. It was very easy, very quick. At the end of the treatment, I have a prophylaxis and some stuff, some things in his teeth. But when we ended, he stood out of the dental chair, and I feel like I know you. Do you ever drive a truck? So it was very funny. It was maybe in the other life. That's why I think hypnosis it's kind of way of life.
I mean, there are very simple reframes as well that you can do with patients that take a few minutes, and quite often they produce dramatic results. And this is maybe a funny story as well. I had a lady who had a needle phobia, and she was very unwell and would not go to the hospital, and would not get her bloods taken. And I got her to bring her aunt up one day as moral support, and I asked the aunt if she would sing a song while I attempted to take the blood, which sounds crazy, I know. But the aunt stood at the bottom of the couch while I had the tourniquet on the lady, and the lady's going, no, I'm not too happy about this. And the aunt started, I said, right, on the count of 3, I want you to sing the song. And the song she sang out loud was, "And Now the End is Near" by Frank Sinatra. I did it my way. Well, the patient was so taken aback at this song, the patient burst into laughter. I managed to get the blood, and the aunt was highly delighted. And this woman went on and got an operation that she needed, and never had any problem with her needle phobia again. She got her bloods taken, no problem. It can be as quick as that.
And this conversation reminds me of one of the things that Michael Yapko often says. And that's another great book for basic hypnosis, his introductory text. But the issue of being hypnotic rather than doing hypnosis, that when you learn this and when it gets in your bones, the quality of the therapeutic interaction just jumps up. And we also have clear research that shows when you change the nature of the interaction, patients start reporting less pain. You don't do anything to them, you change the interaction. And a key part about learning about hypnosis is learning these conversational skills, learning about language, and learning how to get in resonance with people to facilitate a positive change.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think that we should therefore be teaching this more at an undergraduate level to medical and dental students, to psychology students? Should it be more in the core curriculum?
Oh,
no question. No question. And people, I think it's useful for the world to understand hypnosis so as they can know to avoid stage hypnosis, which can be damaging, because the purpose of stage hypnosis is to entertain and not to help. And people can protect themselves from that. People can learn to use language to be helpful and to communicate. And then healers can learn this starting very early on. So absolutely, it needs to be, I think, in the core curriculum of all healing professions.
I mean, I think that's one of the big fears with patients, as I said at the beginning, was the fear of being ridiculed because of things like stage hypnosis. And of course, stage hypnosis picks out people who are normally deep trance subjects. And these patients are likely to have very negative experiences and reactions to any future suggestion of hypnotherapy.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think certainly that, you know, getting, because not only if you learn the rapport, communication and language techniques that we all get as part of our hypnosis training, if this was taught more at an undergraduate level, it's used to help anxious patients. But I think there's almost this perception of that's where its realm is, helping with phobias. But in actual fact, with any patient that comes to see me, it's so important to be able to quickly develop rapport, to communicate well, to understand about this other human being, to project a version of yourself that's going to relate to that person, and then be able to actually help them get what it is they came there for. And the person doesn't need to be anxious for you to learn those skills and be able to help them in that way.
I think people quite often misunderstand rapport, because rapport is not the same as empathy. Rapport is getting into their communication modalities and making sure that you, as I say, build that rapport very, very quickly. And that can be tricky if you've got a very angry patient in front of you. But again, the things that Bridget was saying about using language, about, you know, pacing patients down, about actually managing to get in there and communicate. So if somebody comes in and they're in, you know, head down, then you really want to start to work to get that head back up so that you can actually start to communicate in a meaningful way with them. And I think one of the classic things that's said to children at school when they're in trouble is, when their heads are down, is, look at me when I'm talking to you. And they're not in either of those modes. They don't want to talk and they don't want to look at you because they're feeling usually frightened.
That would be shut down. That would be shut down. So you would have to go in that way, and with a heart of compassion. And, you know, yeah.
Absolutely. I did this with my children when they were younger, and one of them was in what we would call a huff, which in therapeutic terms I would call internal dialogue. But she was in the huff, not speaking, head down. And I went in with feeling language, you know, being very gentle with her, and the head came back up and she told me exactly what the problem was. And that previously, before I learned these skills, might have taken me 2 days to find out what was going on.
Yeah, and you can just identify, oh my God, it looks like you're suffering. Oh, tell me.
I said Kay Thompson was amazing at that, wasn't she? That was her style. That looks painful. You know, that must hurt. Exactly. And instantly the patient says, "Wow, this person gets it."
Yeah, they'll raise their eyes to figure out who the hell got what they were saying non-verbally. Yeah. And then it's just like, go for it.
I would recommend, if you can get an audio recording of Kay Thompson doing some of her verbal gymnastics, well worth listening to. She was impressive beyond description. And she was one of us, a dentist.
It's true.
Oh, really?
She was indeed. That's her book there.
Well, to be accurate, that's the book written about her.
Okay.
Karen Olness and Sarah Lee. Yeah. So that's a collection of Kay's work.
Actually, you have a CD at the back, isn't
it?
I do, but I broke mine. I'm really annoyed. I can't get it.
I have it.
I think one of the things that Mark said earlier about hypnosis being making other therapies more powerful, that's been shown in research now with CBT. The CBT can be effective, but of course, anybody, I mean, I'm in general practice, we have a lot of patients that go for CBT, and they come back a few months later and the CBT is kind of, for whatever reason, petered out, not working anymore. But the studies have now shown that if you use CBT with hypnosis, then in fact the effect is much more long-lasting, and it's a much more effective therapy. And the other thing that Amir Vaz, I remember Amir came across to Scotland to speak to us, and Amir, he used to be a magician, I think, originally, is that right? And then he became a neuroscientist, and fantastic lecturer and absolutely inspiring to speak to. But he was very skeptical about hypnosis, and I met him many years later, and he now had said, well, basically, the MRI scanners are showing us that there's something else going on here, and that it is actually a therapy. it is lighting up different areas of the brain, and that's been very important. And the thing is that these areas of the brain are being lit up because people are using hypnosis as a therapy, and there's no medication involved. And that's important. And I think that's very important for people to understand that this is a therapy that gives them back control. And I think some people in medicine, because of modern medicine is absolutely fantastic. The things we can do now, I mean, even since I've qualified, are amazing. And I think it's wonderful, and I would never decry it. What I would say, that there is this expectation that people need a tablet for everything. They want a tablet because that's the way we've almost been conditioned over the last 30 odd years. And I think that's very sad, because I think patients then lose control and don't realise how much they can do to help heal themselves, whatever the problem.
Well, sorry, Bridget, on you go. On you go. I was going to move on to something slightly different, so I'll let you go.
I was just going to talk about complex trauma that to be released. That was all. Listening to Kathleen and some of the other statements, a lot of the obstacles have to do with complex trauma, and you've got to get in there and bring that up and bring that out and help them transform that and see it from a different viewpoint, and then really move forward.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, are some of the obstacles that are there professionally with hypnosis, the skepticism of colleagues and patients? I mean, there is some phenomenal research and papers being written on hypnosis. You know, I'm excited, you know, the brain scanning, you know, the functional MRI scans, you know, hopefully is going to help push hypnosis forward, especially in the pain management side of things, because we can see what's actually happening. But I mean, Stuart Derbyshire's paper was, you know, back in the mid-90s. How much further on are we with, you know, hypnosis within the professions? Are we, you know, is it being looked at more closely by, you know, by medicine and dentistry? I don't know. I don't know if it is.
Well, if I can relate an anecdote from my own training, we had a course in second year called patient management, which was a euphemism for local anesthesia, conscious sedation, and not much else. The professor on day one of this course, who was in Ontario, an anesthesia specialist in dentistry, basically said, you can run a dental practice many ways. You can use hypnosis, but you can't run a practice with it. This after having spent a week in the practice of one of my dear friends, Victor Rausch, a man whose claim to fame is a cholecystectomy with nothing but self-hypnosis. So the profession, in my humble opinion, in dentistry, I can't speak for medicine, has really not evolved that far in terms of considering it worth talking about or offering as part of undergraduate training. And I say that having spent a great deal of my time lecturing at major North American dental conventions, where I will be in a room with 1,000 people in Chicago, tell them that ASH headquarters was up the street, and perhaps one person went out for a workshop. So in terms of our profession, technology has evolved to such a degree that the thought that you need a soft set of skills, like therapeutically communicating, is not addressed very often, if at all. So I think our problem would be best addressed if we did what the toothpaste companies and the pharmaceuticals do: advertise directly to the public. And then it's a groundswell approach to go look for a practitioner who offers this, versus trying to do it from the profession down. It's not going to happen.
I would agree with that to a certain extent, Gabor. I think if anything, to a certain extent, in the UK, it's almost gone backwards, because we're very much ruled at the moment by protocols, by NICE, by a variety of other different things that people have got to follow. And there's almost no time for anything else for a lot of doctors. Not so much dentists. I think the dentists have kept their grasp on hypnosis, the dentists who practice it. And certainly when I was medical director in one of the health boards over here, I allowed our dentists to use it because some people were actively trying to stop them using it. And because I was in a fortunate position, I could say, well, no, I'm sorry. I know this person is well qualified. I know exactly what they do, and I want it to be used. And in fact, a lot of the communication training that I did within the Primary Care Trust at the time was basically neuro-linguistic based, that kind of thing. So using a lot of hypnotherapy language, how to deal with angry patients, all that kind of thing, how to get the message across to patients. So a lot of that was introduced then, but in terms of traditional, and I think there's a reason for this. If you're trained in a certain discipline, and very much medicine goes down these tracks now. Years ago, you go into hospital and you would be treated for 5 things in the one ward. Now it's you'll have to be referred to this person, to that specialist, to that specialist. They're trained down a single track, and it's almost closed them down, I think, around therapies like hypnosis. But I'm hoping that some of the work, and Mark will know about this, that has now come to, and it's around pain therapy with the World Health Organization, the fact that they're starting to take an interest in it. I think you're absolutely right. Once the patients realise this work, they're going to ask for it much, much more, and that's going to put pressure and hopefully some money towards research and things like that to allow us to do more to promote hypnosis.
Well, here's a point. We've got a fantastic, I guess, testing ground here, because Marcello, you're starting off your work in a country where there was no hypnosis. So it's going to be fascinating. What is your insight? What has been the public perception of what you've been doing? What have your peers and colleagues said about what you've been doing? How's that been going down? How's that happening?
Well, it's a tough job here. I mean, it's not tough just talking about it with colleagues. It's tough with the patients also, because it depends on your work. I have 3 or 4 works in different places. So I have in the hospital, private practice. So it depends on the people you deal with. Mainly, the main idea is as Caitlin said, I'm trying to give an insight to the patient, giving a different side of the treatment. And when the patient understands that, they ask, at least in the hospital, they ask for you. I want to be attended by this dentist, this young boy that was very sympathetic. And it's just not a matter of being kind with the patient. They know you are doing something different. They understand that this is not the usual thing. So I think it's the work here is going to be tough. We have a lot of misconceptions and myths also. Some colleagues still ask for me not to become a chicken or something like that, a stage hypnosis. So it's going to be a tough work. I think the boy is in the right point. Do the right marketing, the right thing, so as to change the angle.
Yeah.
And so to that point, I want to give some encouragement here. We have a whole movement in the United States regarding integrative medicine, and hypnosis is part of that. So in the previous hospital system that I work with, I was a chief of integrative medicine and created holistic nurses, chaplains, and such that were trained in the basics of hypnosis. And it was amazing the results that they got. Number 2, I developed a slideshow and a talk that I could go to medical societies and show them how hypnosis actually works, what it is in the brain, sympathetic, parasympathetic, putting it in medical terms, so that they could understand pathophysiology, as well as what we understand briefly of consciousness and how they can interface and be used successfully in a therapeutic maneuver. And I would actually give case after case after case, slide after slide, all the way from this trauma or a hospice case or whatever case, and show them how hypnosis actually works. Third point is that the VA hospital has now designated hypnosis as a primary offering for all veterans. So I would encourage, you guys to maybe even make up an integrative medicine track or whatever you want to call it in the UK and start teaching some of these modalities.
Maybe I'll add a couple.
Excuse me one more second. And it, Ash, the other piece, I agree with you, Gabor, and that's interesting. I'll take back to the executive committee about an advertisement, but you have to build up the numbers and have the therapists be able to be seen, right? So we do the training session 6 a year, level 1, level 2, and an advanced or TCW, train the trainer type thing, educator. So I think by getting our numbers up and out, these functioning, and then supporting them with our local component societies, then it just really builds up strength and the presence of what we do. Mark, please.
Oh, just a quick point. One of the reasons that the VA is now requiring that veterans be allowed hypnosis if they choose it is due to the research findings that are coming out, and it's effective. And so the NIH, the National Institute of Health, has a special institute that sponsors and pays for clinical trials in integrative medicine. Hypnosis is one of them. So as a result of that funding, there are now more clinical trials, randomized clinical trials. We just now got $2.5 million to do another clinical trial. As these findings come out and demonstrate efficacy, I think that institutions will start to respond. So it's gradual and it goes in waves, but the scientific findings stay. Once you publish a rigorous trial, that is there in the literature that people can go to. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've seen this gradual increase. So I maintain optimism. When I see movies where they show hypnosis in a bad light, I get discouraged. But I think we can gradually continue to work towards truth, and rather than using hypnosis as a silly movie plot.
Yeah, excellent. Now we've got about 15 minutes to run here in this broadcast. So I would just like to say, anybody watching, if you have a question or comment, please just comment on YouTube below, and we'll address it in these last 15 minutes or so. As well. So I think you're right. And when you look at the training modules offered by the hypnosis societies, it always astonishes me that there are not more people coming on them, because for one, most of the time you get your credits for doing them, especially here in the UK. They are inexpensive. They are phenomenal value, these courses, and to a person, people that come on these training workshops will say that is the best. That's the best course I've been on in years. I wish I'd done it sooner, and it's getting that information across to more of our colleagues without standing on a soapbox,
What's wrong with a soapbox, Mike?
Well, this is it. It's a virtual soapbox, isn't it?
Yeah.
but and also too, I think going to conferences. So for International Society for Hypnosis has one in Krakow in June, if we can get there with the new COVID variant. But if not, hoping that will be virtual, because when you can rub shoulders and switch ideas, and I've learned so much from Gabor. For instance, he taught me very quick induction techniques, and I still continue to utilize those. And so being able to be at the same place with all these other people, you just pick up an enormous amount that enriches your practice and widens your scope of practice.
It's so true. Some of these big international conferences, you often, your goal when you go to a conference as a young dentist is that you maybe come away with a few bits of information that will change your practice. But whenever I've been to an international or a European conference, you're just overwhelmed with the amount of things that you pick up and learn every time. Even when you go listen to the same speaker talking on the same topic, you get an entirely different perspective and information on it.
Well, of course, a different frame of reference. And I'd like to put in that Ash, the American clinical hypnosis, we have a national/international, if you will, conference coming up in Jacksonville, Florida, March the 3rd of 22. So, you know, I'd like to invite everybody there because they're just, I mean, people here like Mark is part of our society, Gabor is part of our society. You know, we're blessed with these master teachers. And I would just invite everybody to pigeonhole them. You know, what do you do? How do you do it? Because you'll always get some little jewel that you can take back.
Do you know what I love about hypnosis conferences as well? And I heard somebody talking at a dental conference recently saying that when you go to an aesthetic dentistry conference, they'll tell you 80% of their recipe, but they won't give you the final 20%, so they keep that for themselves. At a hypnosis conference, you get 100% of the recipe. You really do.
And once you finish with Krakow, you can always come to Istanbul in 2023.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. For some lovely sunshine. So.
And it's, you know, the people you meet in the conferences as well, you know, a number of you guys have met in conferences and you go out for the dinners, and the social element is second to none.
I think I have two balls of lightning. One was the first conference I went to with our own society. And the other one was when I met the Ericksonians. I just thought, wow, on both occasions, I get this. This is definitely me. And it's definitely something that, you know, that I can run with. And it's going to be absolutely fantastic for my patients. And I still feel like that is probably the only, what they call alternative therapy over here that I haven't kind of dropped because it works so well.
Mm-hmm. So, Kathleen, I would really strongly have your people quit calling it alternative, because that means it's either this or that, but rather complementary or integrative, because that language is incredibly important.
Absolutely.
I'll just make another pitch since we're talking about conferences. Another pitch for that hypnosis, as you start to get into it, is just fascinating. So it's not just that you walk away with these skills, but the whole conference is, every talk is just so interesting, and so and you learn some really practical skills. But you know, sometimes like I go to non-hypnosis conference, I go, well, that was kind of boring. That's you know, I'll never get that hour and a half back. But boy, the talks and the ideas are just inherently interesting, and so that's another reason to go. Besides the people, besides the skill, it's just very absorbing.
It is, and as I say, going to workshops that aren't even to do with your sphere of work. I mean, I went to a nocturnal enuresis workshop. You know, I'm a dentist. What am I doing in a bedwetting lecture? But learning the language skills, the metaphors, and the way to speak to children, I was sitting there realizing I'm the only dentist possibly in the room, but I'm going to use this with the kids that I'm treating. You know, it's fabulous.
I think the other thing is a therapy that keeps on giving, because we also learn a lot from our patients. I think one of the greatest teachers for me have been my patients.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think what you discover, whether you're sitting in a bedwetting or any other lecture, whether it's related to your profession or not, is that ultimately we're talking about the same thing. A whole person perspective and the interaction between therapist and patient in that whole person interaction. And I think that's missing from our usual modes of training, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely, Maureen. We agree with that comment. I don't think you'll get anybody disagreeing with that. And so, you know, what do you reckon? You know, 180 years ago, BRAID, you know, stood in front of this room full of people and presented these wacky theories that, you know, there is no magnetic force at play here. This is a physiological, a psychological thing. What do you think he would feel? Do you think he would be pleased with how far hypnosis has come? Would he be disappointed? What do you think he would feel if he was sitting in this lecture now, if I could press a button and he would appear on screen? What do you reckon he would say?
I would think he would be pleased that it has come further in lots of ways, and I think he would be pleased around the research and the different countries that are now involved with it. So I think he would be pleased with all that. I think from a UK perspective, I think he would maybe be disappointed the fact that it has not been integrated into the medical and dental communities as fully as it should have been. And I think that would be the disappointment. But I also think he would be very happy that we're still on course to challenge the traditional therapies and say, we're here and actually we're not going away, and soon the patients are going to be demanding it.
Yeah,
I think he would want to live 30 years more to see the results.
Indeed, I think he'd be pleased that we're talking about him tonight, though. I think he would enjoy that. You know, obviously, when he came up with hypnotism, he's often credited of inventing the word hypnotism, or people say hypnosis, but he repopularized the word hypnotism from a French word. And I think he then tried to change it because obviously he realized that it wasn't really a form of sleep. And there was a number of words he came out with. Humorously, one of them was braidism. I think he saw Mesmer's name and realized he's maybe missed an opportunity here. So he tried to change it to braidism and failed. People were talking about hypnotism already. So I think he'd be pleased that we were sitting here mentioning him 180 years later. I think any of us would want that. Which is nice. Okay, we've got a couple of other comments coming here. I use the term holistic approach with clients, the process of partnership between the patient. Absolutely. Yeah, indeed. Wonderful to listen to you all. It's fascinating to see the evolution of hypnosis and how far advances have been made, especially with neuroscience. That truly is the exciting part. And Mark, we didn't get massively into that side of it, but that when I first started using hypnosis, I had a very interesting pain management case. I was about 23, 24 years old. This lady appeared in my surgery with crippling pain. And I taught her a very simple dial technique. She was to come back for a full session, at which point I prepared, a pile of papers ready to bombard her with every pain management technique under the sun. And she came in with a smile on her face and a bottle of wine. And she said, I'm wasting your time today because I was playing with my dial. And she said, when it hits 0, is it meant to click and switch off and never come back? And of course I said, yes, that's exactly what's supposed to happen. But it was that moment that made me, my dental student scientific brain was saying, okay, is this coincidence? Is it the medication finally clicked in? Is the source of the pain gone? But I couldn't explain why at that moment when she visualized the dial going to 0, the pain went away and never came back. And it was that reason I ended up doing the master's course at University College London. And I learned a lot about the research, the neuroscience. I wrote essays about the theories of hypnosis. But ultimately, I come back to the basic techniques I learned on the British Society of Medical and Dental Hypnosis Scotland training courses. And that's what I still use day to day.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that BRAID would be incredibly happy about is the research that's come out, especially in the last 2 to 3 decades. He would want to sit for weeks and just read it because we've learned a great deal about how the brain uses this language to change its automatic response, and so that people end up feeling better rather quickly, or can end up feeling better rather quickly. So that's been a significant advance in the last few decades, and that's continuing. The funding is continuing. So more research will be coming out over the next 5-10 years as well.
Is there an issue with the name of hypnosis? So with this phenomenal research, are people already putting up barriers and blinkers because of their preconceptions?
I think that. Sorry.
Up front and just tell them that there's stage hypnosis and then there's clinical hypnosis. And the two are the difference between a cow and a pig.
I think it's starting to regain credibility, and the reason I'm saying that is because there are so many other therapies that have been developed from hypnosis. I mean, I would argue CBT and mindfulness, although we could argue where mindfulness started, and there's a lot of other people would say, well, it's meditation by any other name, but it's also a form of hypnosis, maybe without any necessarily things like, instruction, or not that you would normally do that with a patient. It's maybe processing more. And sometimes I think there are issues with that, because sometimes it opens what I would call Pandora's box, and what comes flying up without explanation is very difficult sometimes then for patients to deal with. It's been shown as a different therapy, I think, in terms of it's one that encompasses all these things and more. And I think it's starting to regain credibility, because I think taking bits of it and saying, well, this will work or this will work, well, they work to a certain extent. I don't believe, as Mark said earlier, that they work as well as hypnosis does.
Thank you so much for this meeting. I have one question. If you were to give one advice to psychotherapists who learn to use hypnosis, what would it be? It's from Andrew.
Do it yourself.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, if you look at what BRAID did, he went to LaFontaine's lecture. Who was the first person that BRAID hypnotized? Himself.
And I would also like to say to the psychotherapists, most of the people who sign up for the training sessions at ASH are psychotherapists. Okay? I would say they're at least 80%, maybe 90%. And this is used extensively in practice. So we have people like Philip Pell, who is the director for pain psychology for MedStar. We have, just incredible. We've got Jensen here, all kinds of people here that you're not, excuse me, Mark, you're a physician, but there's a ton of psychotherapists that use this.
I think it's important to remember as well, obviously, hypnosis is the vehicle for delivering the therapy and making, as Mark said, making your therapy more efficient and more successful. So if you're a good psychotherapist, you can become a great psychotherapist with hypnosis.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, and my advice would be to go get some training at your local hypnosis society. And then come to Krakow in next year, and then go to Istanbul the year after, and get some interactions and training. And then as soon as you can, start using the skills, because you will be incredibly surprised and happy at your client's response. And many of them will say, I don't know if it was the hypnosis, but I feel a whole lot better. And that's because the change happens at the non-conscious level. So they're often not aware that it's the hypnosis that did it. But like I said, if you want to, only floss the teeth you want to keep, only use hypnosis with the patients that you want to get better.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite client comments is when I now have what I call a therapeutic consultation with a new dental phobic patient. And at the end of it, quite often the comment is, it's really strange, Mike. I'm actually looking forward to starting my treatment, and you've not even done any hypnosis, but it's almost as if you have. And I think, yes, almost, yeah, because I'm using it the whole time.
Do you remember Finkelstein?
Yeah.
A dentist. Yeah, and he would say his patients would tell him, your dental office is the only place where I can feel completely relaxed. These were he specialized in dental phobia patients. This is the only place where I can feel completely relaxed.
A lovely comment here from Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Thanks for the great initiative and starting 118 years ago to look forward to far into the future and talking about clinical hypnosis can overcome some obstacles. That's a nice comment from Nicole. And I think you're right. That bit of advice, training, looking for, if you're working in healthcare, if you're a medic, a dentist, psychologist, psychotherapist, have a look at one of the societies of your peers, I would say. Certainly if you look via the European Society or via the International Society, they have affiliated societies with will tell you the recognized and what's the word I'm looking for? Not accredited, but recognized societies within that group where you can get training. So that would be my advice of where to start.
I have a little word. Oh, sorry, Bridget. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say just very quickly that because ours are virtual, or societies may have virtual ones, you could be in a foreign country, you could be global and still join a training session. That's all I want to say. Thank you, Marcelo.
Oh, it's okay. No, actually, as Mark said, I was in the past. That was exactly what I've done. I had my training here locally, and then started traveling. Then I get Mike and Gabor and go to Iran and a lot of countries, and now I'm here. So this is how it works, actually.
And that's what was the first hypnosis conference you went to?
Here in Uruguay, or
no, the first hypnosis conference internationally that you went to.
Actually, it was in Brazil, a foreign one, and that's where when my passion started awakening. It's a country right near here, so
of course. Excellent. Well, listen, this has been a fantastic evening. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you guys have as well. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I could keep going. There's lots of questions that we could keep asking each other and talking about. And maybe we shouldn't wait 180 years till we have another get together. We should do it sooner, maybe.
I'm not going to last that long, Mike.
If he keeps up with the whiskey, he probably will.
My whiskey shelf is just behind the books. Do you know, Gabor, I feel like I can reach into your bookshelf and just lift one of your books off and put it into mine.
Well, if the bookshelf directly behind me is all hypnosis related materials. For the question for the psychotherapist, find a good book and then see if you can't talk to the author directly.
Yeah.
And then have them direct you to the closest recognized society for training.
Absolutely.
Well, you got websites now, and everybody can go on the websites and find training classes on probably ish and maybe your European societies. So I would just encourage you to go on the websites.
Indeed. And a lot of good books have been mentioned tonight. Mark, I'll give your books a little plug here. There are some fantastic books that Mark has been editing. What book number are you on just now? Is it 3 that have been released?
The 4th book has been released, where I'm editing the 5th one right now.
I need that one.
There we go. So we're getting requests now, so that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Please, Rashmi, you must come to one of the conferences. Come and meet us in person. If you've enjoyed this, you will love a live conference. You will absolutely love it.
And once a month, I have a coffee with the president. So we get together and we have coffee or beverage of your choice, depending on the time of day. Once a month, if you're an ISH member or a future ISH member, you'd be welcome to join us. And we have discussions about hypnosis.
Yeah, and in addition to that, there's a hypnotic idea exchange that goes on at ASH that's open. There's also a hypnotic listserv that talks about different clinical cases that's constantly ongoing. So there's a lot of things, a lot of resources as well for you.
There really are, and in the society in Scotland, we have recently started digitizing a lot of our records of DVDs and cassettes and videos we've taken over the years. We've got about 50 years worth of lectures by some phenomenal names, and it's so exciting. It really is so exciting.
Wow.
Yeah, we've got a massive library now of that, and it didn't take us long. It was one of the good things about lockdown that we actually had the time to do it, and probably more money to do it as well because of the membership fees and things, and a lot of our courses being online.
But one of our hopes is we can use some of this historic material as part of online teaching. Watch a short section and then have an interactive discussion over what we've looked at. And that'll be really useful. Excellent. Okay, is that a natural conclusion to our this evening's trance?
Cute.
We're all nodding.
I'm not sure what time it is around the world for you guys, but thank you so much for giving up your valuable time to join us for this this discussion. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been fantastic.
Thanks very much for organising it.
Yes, thanks, Mike, for organizing. It's been a lot of fun.
You're
And
more
it's
than
so
welcome.
good to see everyone's faces here in this room. I only wish we could have seen the faces of all the participants as well. But,
Indeed. Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, the beauty of this is we had some live interaction and a good number watching live, but it's now on YouTube. It's there forevermore, so people will come back to this and hopefully watch in the future. Feel free to leave comments below if there's anything you want to ask. You know, we may come on and we can answer by text if there's anything anyone wants to know. So please do still ask any questions. That is no problem. Please look up these organisations, these societies. Join us, join in, engage, and enjoy. So, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much. And thank you very much, James Braid, for your work of 180 years ago.
yes, yeah.
Yeah. Aloha.
Take care.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.